any feedback or advice for coaches that, maybe are standing on the sidelines or behind the bench that, in that moment, I see it from that perspective too. It's hard to allow players to make mistakes when it impacts the whole team, but, kind of tying it back to that's a learning opportunity for them and, for the rest of the group potentially.
You know what, if you think about it from this standpoint, and I think this was comes from Mike Babcock. I don't know if you've ever heard this too, but after games, especially like bad games or bad performances, he wouldn't rip them right afterwards in the locker room. He'd wait like 5 to 10 minutes. And those 5 to 10 minutes allowed him to calm down just a little bit and then start to look at the entire picture and the entire game a little bit more effectively. So then he could deliver the message, his post-game message that he wanted to deliver. Because oftentimes you just get pissed about the last thing that just happened. When in reality, you could have done a lot of good things and just made one mistake. Yeah, the one mistake might have cost you, but try to take the good with the bad too. And because oftentimes the player hears the last thing you said, right? And so if the last thing you said was a negative, it depends on how the player's going to take it too, right? That's another part of the equation too. But it's like from a coach's standpoint is try to take a deep breath. Like if you see something that happens that really pisses you off, that could have cost the team, take a deep breath. Try to put yourself in the player's perspectives, because oftentimes the player is not going to be like, oh, let me see like how bad of a mistake I can make right now to see how much of it, our team can lose by. I mean, the person isn't doing it intentionally. Hopefully not. But so oftentimes the coach should try to put yourself in their shoes and try to understand what they were doing from their perspective. And if you can try to do that, then you can try to connect with the player on an individual, because the player's already going to feel bad. Right? They're already going to feel a certain way. So what good is it going to make them feel if you try to put them down even further? You've got to be able to try to put yourself in their shoes and understand like, hey, what were you trying to do on that play? And I'm sure they had some sort of thought process. Hopefully they had some sort of thought process of what they were trying to do, and it didn't work out the way it was intended. And I think you'll go further with that player if you can try to connect and relate with them a little bit more. And you said it before in the conversation too, is a lot of things that, we're kind of discussing comes down to communication, and your ability to effectively communicate with somebody else is going to be really based on the relationship that you have with somebody else too. That goes from a coach to a player as well as a player to a coach. And that could be a sport coach. It could be a strength coach. It could be a teacher, a professor, whatever it is. Like those relationships are extremely important to be able to cultivate so you can develop trust, right? And when you develop trust, you understand that a coach has your best interest when they speak to you and they try to teach you and coach you. They're going to be more willing to listen to what they have to say. But if it's a transactional relationship and you don't have trust in the person that's delivering feedback, sometimes the feedback they could be giving you, even though it could be well intended or it could be good, may be met with resistance because there's no mutual trust there too. So I think that's the biggest thing from a coach's side too, is try to get the understanding and get the perspective of the player too, so you can try to help effectively guide them through that process of failure to ultimately success.
No, I think that's a great point. I think one of the best questions a coach can ask a player is, what did you see there? Because when you're standing on the bench or, when you're watching from the stands, you have a broader picture of where all the pieces are on the field or on the court, on the ice, and you can see where everybody is and the way everybody's moving. And the sight lines and the vantage point are very different when you're actually playing the sport. We joke all the time when we're watching games that, it's an easy game from here. Once you're on the ice and it's moving faster and people are trying to,
kill you.
What was the phrase that I heard a few years ago? Willfully to decrease your motivation to participate in the game, I think was one way contact was described. It's a much different vantage point when you're actually playing the sport. So I think, asking a player what they saw and, kind of what led to them making a certain decision can go a long way in both sides kind of understanding the perspective of the other one. And, maybe there's some things that a coach saw from the bench or the sideline that can help cue the player on how to make a better decision the next time. But it starts with, to me, of really understanding what that player saw so that,
Absolutely.
The coach knows what triggered them to make that choice.
Absolutely.